welcome to History in Lowell. I'm Maritza Grooms, here with my personal professor, my TV dad, Bob Forrant.
Okay, I'm getting more jobs here.
You know, the summertime means a big thing for Lowell. Our Folk Fest.
Yep.
I love the Folk Fest.
Yeah, coming up. I wish someday they did a poll and they just randomly stop people and ask them their zip code to figure out where people are from. Like how many people from, like I live in Centerville, right, across the river. How many people from Centerville walk over the bridge and go to the folk festival? Or from Back Central, or even from the Acre just up the road. As opposed to, I have nothing against people from the outside coming in. It's definitely a shot in the arm for the economy. But it would be interesting, and then try to figure out, well, if people aren't participating as much who live in the city proper, why, and what can be done to change that? Is there a local flavor, or what about more local acts?
Yeah.
Is there something that could be done? I've never seen people actually try to think that through, and the researcher in me always is curious. Like, and I feel like if I go up to people and say, where the hell are you from? They're going to think I'm weird and call the cops. So that's
Maybe I could get away with it, but I don't know.
Well, you have a microphone, and if you have LTC badge on or something,
Right.
you probably could, but I'm not sure a random old guy could get away with it in today's America. So yeah, I don't know I don't know particularly what, but it would be an easy, quick, even if like when the Bucket Brigade, when they're raising money, even if they just randomly said, would you mind telling me your zip code? And then wrote it down. And then there was a way at the end of a Saturday to say, okay, well, of the 500 people that donated, X number were from Lowell. It would be neat to know.
It would be. I love that. I love that idea, and I would love to know, because I've heard that people come from all over to come to this Folk Fest. And I mean, I guess I would too, because it's fun, festive, food.
Yep. Food, music, dance, what can go wrong?
Exactly.
And free.
And free, that's the key.
It's got all the components. But so I've always been, it's funny because we were thinking about a show to do in July, and then we thought, okay, the Folk Fest. And I hadn't really delved into that much of the history of how it got here, other than knowing that starting in the 90s it becomes an annual event. The Folk Festival actually has these incredibly deep roots that go back nationally to the 1930s. In 1934, in the midst of the Great Depression, the federal government is, through Franklin Roosevelt's presidential administration, trying to figure out how to bolster the morale of the country. Banks have failed, farms have failed. We've gone through the Dust Bowl. There's just this tremendous angst in the country, kind of in a way like we're going through now, but for different reasons. And Roosevelt decides that there are lots of out-of-work artists, musicians, theater people, writers, photographers, and they create a program within his administration called the Works Progress Administration, the WPA. And within the WPA, they basically create these little projects. And they basically take out-of-work people from all these different arts categories I just mentioned, and they hire them to basically go around the country performing. Oh, wow. To putting on plays like Shakespeare in the Park, and Philharmonic concerts in New York City and in Central Park, and things in San Francisco or LA or wherever, in the middle of the country, in the heartland. And all of that sort of creates this interesting sort of ferment of cultural activity, and it gets people to see, in a way, the power of music. And out of this, all of this comes this thing called the National Folk Festival and the National Council for the Traditional Arts. The New Deal is great for acronyms, right? So this is the NCTA, the National Council for Traditional Arts, and it's the brainchild of a woman from Kentucky named Sarah Knott, who I had not heard of. I've never heard her name associated with the festival in Lowell. Here's an antecedent, but now we know. Sarah Knott from Paducah, Kentucky, is the brain woman behind the idea of creating this festival. It starts in 1934, and it's held in nearly 30 different communities over the next several years.
Wow, wow. And you know, as you set the scene, I'm like, wow, it really is kind of like like around that time because there were strikes happening right here in Lowell
Yep.
locally. That was what's going on, and people did need that morale boost.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I think the very first ones in St. Louis, right, in the heartland, St. Louis, Missouri, 1934. That's the first one, and again, it travels around to different places, and ultimately the idea is to sort of hold it in different parts of the country, different cities, for 2 or 3 years in a row, and then hope that in the aftermath of it being held under the auspices of this national council for 2 or 3 years, then the community will take it up and continue it. And that's actually, when we jump to history, that's what happens in Lowell.
Yeah, because it came here in like 87.
87, yeah.
And it stayed for a couple of years.
Yep.
And then 90s, in 1990 is when we
Yep.
took it over and
Yeah.
became the Lowell Folk Fest here.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and the other thing is that in doing and trying to dig in and do the work, what I also began to, I guess in a way, connect the dots. I had done a lot of work, we've talked about a lot on the show about the International Institute of Lowell and how it's settled immigrants and refugees in the city. It has for over 100 years. And one of their hallmarks was cultural festivals. Starting in the late 1920s, they had them every year.
So we did it first.
So in a way, we somewhat, yeah, we could argue that we predate 1934
And Sarah.
and the National Council. And maybe Sarah came to one of those and like, but there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of that, although Lowellians would love to claim it, right? We always love to say we're first at something. There's no evidence that's the case, but there are all of these festivals through the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s in Lowell into the 1960s, and these are big, several thousand people. Eventually they start being held for several days at a time at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. Food, music, dance, dress, pageantry, talent shows representing different countries.
So cool.
You can read about these, which I did in the local newspapers. And I've got to think, this is where I think the connection is, that when this National Council shows up in Lowell in the 80s and suggests, do you want to do this? And this is at the moment where the park has arrived in the city and Boarding House Park has been refurbished and the downtown Lowell is sort of going through its historical connection, renaissance, if you will. And the city, in a way, is prepared because it does have this legacy of having done these things. And it has a lot of community-based people and organizations that have a track record doing these kinds of things.
We're such a, I always think of us as this weird microcosm of the national stage, but every time we talk, I'm like, you know, we're really not beating the allegations.
Yeah, no, it's here.
Yeah.
And so it's really fascinating that when the national organization picks Lowell to do this for 3 years, 87, 88, 89. So and they're the 49th, 50th, and 51st National Folk Festivals.
Wow.
So the 50th anniversary folk festival of this national organization is here in Lowell.
Wow.
And I found the program books,
Get at
the
it.
covers for the program books, and about 150,000 people show up to the 1981, and that's the point where then the city starts taking over, and starting in 97, 98, it formalizes as the Lowell Folk Festival.
Wow.
And it moves on from there.
150,000?
Yeah.
Wow.
At the 50th anniversary one.
Oh my gosh.
And talent from all over the country. The program books you can find online, and it's really interesting to see the musical acts and the sort of cultural representations and everything that was happening. And so it's really pretty amazing to again sort of see this Lowell connection to all of this. And the other one that somewhat corresponds to this one that sort of is generated around the same time is held in Seattle, Washington. So you've got one sort of in the high northwest and one in the northeast of the United States, and they're the two biggest ones. Apparently the Seattle one claims to be larger. But we might have to duke it out over that.
Yeah, and are they happening at the same time? How can
Yeah,
you
I
really
don't know.
Yeah.
That's a good question. Again, it was very, very sort of revealing when I started looking at this and thinking, wow, okay, there is a tale to tell here.
Yeah, that's so intriguing. And I wonder in your research, as you're looking into all of this and you're finding out about what was going on at these festivals, is it kind of like our folk fest today? Is it anything like our folk fest today, or have we just strayed away from the original blueprint?
No, it's pretty similar. The musical genres have evolved over time. Obviously, music in the 30s, 1930s would be way different than now, and so there's been more of an attempt to bring more sort of current musical group singers and dancers and such to Lowell. But also what's changed is the cultural representations, and so I think that the festival committee has done a pretty good job of, as Lowell's community has changed, making sure to bring acts to the stages in Lowell at Folk Festival weekend that are representative of the change. So there's if you go back into the early programming in the 80s and in the 49, 50, and 51st, there's not a lot of African
Right.
representation, for example, or Afghani, or from Southeast Asian countries, let's say. Now there is, and that's reflective, obviously, of how Lowell's immigration history, refugee history, has changed. So that's a good thing.
And whole blocks of their food, which is
Right, and food, right?
so
I mean,
delicious.
basically, I think I look forward more to the food than
Always.
sometimes even the music. Being a foodie at heart, so
Oh,
there's
yeah.
definitely a way. And again, what's interesting is back in these early iterations in Lowell, lots of churches had food booths, lots of cultural organizations had food booths, and that's the same today.
Yeah.
And a lot of their operating money that they use to do programming throughout the year in their community, their church, their neighborhood group, whatever it might be, comes from the sale of large amounts of food. People are already cooking, that are cooking and freezing things and getting them pre-cooked and whatever to then fire up at Folk Festival because there's just too much to actually do that weekend. There's just so many people. And there are definitely food booths that people who come back year after year, they definitely habituate the same food. They go right back to the same
Oh yeah.
the same booth. And certain foods basically have key spots right across the street from the festival stage at Boarding House Park. And so you can kind of look forward to that same, I like going down the street and you get that smell.
Oh yeah.
Okay, there's where the Thai food is. There's
Yep.
where, whatever.
Puerto Rican food.
Yep,
Yeah.
there's where it is, or over the African food over at St. Anne's.
Yes.
On the grounds at St. Anne's, there's going to be, and so it does have it does really reflect well the culture of the city.
Did they have a food component with the International Institute in the 30s?
Yeah, I mean that was really what they also did is they had not so much food competitions, but they had like tasting things. And there's a funny photo in one of the Lowell newspapers that I saw of I forget his name, but one of the mayors of Lowell in the 30s, and he's sampling food from, I'm not going to say the country, but he's sampling food from the country, and the look on his face, he obviously didn't like what he had in his mouth, but he got captured by the photographer and didn't quite know what he was going to do with the food. Nobody had slipped him a napkin where he could do it in a delicate way, and he kind of has this photo like, ooh, like what is this? But lots of food. There are lots of really interesting photographs of food samplings. And so that's really fun. The other thing that these festivals did to raise money to continue to do them is have cookbooks.
Oh, yes.
And so they would have like the World Comes to Lowell cookbooks, and they would get from various immigrant and refugee communities in the city at the time a key recipe from a family, and then they would put this multinational cookbook together and then sell it, and that would help raise money for communities to then sell. What's also interesting is I also found, and I'm looking at the ad, Pollard's Department Store, which was one of the major department stores in Lowell in the early part up through the first half of the 20th century. Pollard's department store hosted its own international festival every fall. And so the ad is here for I have the ad for the 1954 Folk Festival, and I have a note on the side of it, a folk festival before the Folk Festival. September 20, our first annual international fair. And I just want to read the ad because it's just so interesting in terms of the city. Each day for 6 days, a foreign group from the city of Lowell, including French, Italian, Portuguese, Syrian, Lebanese, Armenian, and Greeks, will have a program of exhibits, folklore, cooking, and handcrafts at Pollard's. Come see an international fashion show, hear native music, and take part in the most interesting program of international atmosphere that has been viewed in the Merrimack Valley. French Day is Monday, September 20, Italian Day, September 21, Portuguese Day, September 23, Syrian Day, September 24, Armenian Day, September 25, Greek Day, September 27.
Wow.
That's pretty incredible, and what it demonstrates is the store getting it that this is going to attract people.
Yes. And it's the people who are already here.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's a really cool ad in the newspaper. I found it as I was doing some other research. I never knew I would use it for this reason, but as I was doing research, I thought, oh, wait a minute, where's that Pollard's ad? That sounds like whatever. And they're, our first annual international fair.
That is so cool.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Right? So.
And all of those booths are still here at
Yeah.
our focus now.
Those groups are still here, and they're going to have food at the one coming up.
That is so incredible. Wow.
That's
wow.
why I love research.
Yeah. Oh my God. And you're so good at it.
Well, it's just luck. I mean, and also 30 years of doing it and having a fairly decent memory of, wait, I know I have that somewhere. I just have to find it.
In one of these files.
Yeah, I just have to find it.
I wish that they would do like a fashion show now, but they do crafts.
Right.
That's a thing that they do, and they bring like traditional crafts from whatever the heritage is of that place.
Yeah.
And I remember once I saw, actually it was on LTC a few years back, and it was African hair braiding. And they would, and I don't know how I felt about it as a black person, but seeing all kinds of people walk around with the African braids. But I did think it was really cool.
That's like when tourists go to Jamaica and they somehow think
and
they
everybody
need
comes
dreads,
back.
right?
Yeah,
It's like,
exactly.
wait, no, don't get on the plane.
Right.
Yeah.
But it is a really cool, like they'll do classes, they'll teach you how to do stuff. There's weaving, there's all kinds of activities with not just the music and the food, but there's all kinds of crafts. And so that's been going on too for a while.
Yeah, and again, sort of this link to the crafts at the Pollard's. Yeah, Lucy Lockram Park is where all the for those that are going to come and look for that area. Right. I mean, there are people there that do all sorts of wood crafting, or people that make musical instruments representative of their communities. And so again, it was interesting to sort of look. I mean, this is a newspaper article I have in front of me for Folk Festival held in the 60s. And it says 4,000 at Folk Festival. This one was held at the Lowell Memorial Auditorium. And there's, a photograph, annual Folk Festival, sort of descriptions of all the different booths, dances and songs of Africa, Mexico, Germany, Syria, Ireland, Cuba, Poland, Ukraine, Greece, Portugal, Armenia, Italy, and the American Indian. Wow. Each group presented their authentic country's dance routine and the sounds of their particular music. This is at this festival at the auditorium. This is in the 1960s.
That's in the 60s?
Yeah.
Wow. So like that is kind of before we saw, like you were saying before, we didn't have as many African immigrants, as many Hispanic
but they're already
folks
having
coming
something.
here. But they're, yeah,
Yep.
Wow,
Yep.
wow.
Yeah, again, it's sort of all, and I do think that when then the national organization came and did their 49, 50, and 51st national folk festivals, they could draw upon, and the organizers could draw upon this tradition. There's a legacy here. There's a generational sort of understanding of the role and importance of this, and so it wasn't. I mean, I do think that's important for people to realize. Lowell wasn't a blank slate. when the park showed up and when this national organization showed up, we were already doing this.
Yeah.
The folk festival before the folk festival, if you will. And I think that really matters. I think that's important as we get ready to sort of do another one of these in a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, like we always say, the history matters.
Yes.
You have to acknowledge where something started. It wasn't just because, and you have to acknowledge even why the parks were even here and what was going on there with, you know, my favorite things, the urban renewal. Not my favorite thing, but my favorite thing to look back on as a blight for us, when, even though they were calling the neighborhoods blighted, and kind of reinvigorating Lowell. We were already doing that all of that time, even when Lowell was experiencing the economic downturn, even when on the national stage immigration quotas were happening. We were still celebrating the people who were here and the cultures that they brought and the traditions that they brought. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean, and the ad for Pollard's is really important, I think, because I mean, if there was a lot of animosity in the city toward immigrant populations, if there was a lot of bitterness and hatred, and we know some of that existed obviously from what we've been doing, but it wasn't so deep and so compelling and so in charge of the story that a major department store basically would come up with this idea to have every year in the fall a folk festival inside its store, because they would have worried it's going to keep, you know, the way we are now, right? That you like, well, you can't go there because they do this, or you can't go there because they do that. Easily they could have said, well, why do we want to do this? We're just going to make waves in the community and we're going to discourage other people from coming into our store. Well, clearly they saw it. They weren't doing this to lose money. They were doing this as a marketing tool to bring people in. And do it in a really interesting way. So I found, when I saw that ad, I remember the first time I saw it, I said, wow, this is really fascinating, because like now we see people wanting to boycott different products because they advertise on TV with a transgender person, let's say.
Yeah.
Like we can't buy Bud Light, even though I wouldn't drink it anyway. But you know, because they use a certain person in an ad, you can't buy their stuff anymore. Here's Pollard's, the major department store, one of the major department stores of the city, thinking nothing of creating a several-day folk festival. And the International Institute, again, I think is one of the keys here to doing this, starting back in the 1920s. And what's also, back to even where we started the conversation, that so many in Lowell participated. The ones at the this one at the auditorium with 4,000 people, that was the first day. And there were so many people that everybody couldn't get in. And so when you read the newspaper article that goes with the headline, they extended it at the auditorium for 4 more days so that everybody that wanted to get in could get in. And they kept the booths up and kept it going because there was so much, there were more people. The fire marshals wouldn't let people into the auditorium. And so again, it's really, it's pretty telling. And so that's why it got me thinking, well, if these precursors in Lowell are largely attracting Lowellians, how do we do that again?
Yeah.
How do we create a community level of participation and involvement in the folk festivals that we have now? How do we, you know, is there such a thing maybe as a local stage, where it's all local groups, local music, local musicians, local bands, whatever, local dancers, whatever. I don't know, right? But it just, I am now going to try to figure out who's here. So if I get arrested on Folk Festival weekend for accosting people on the street, asking them where they're from, bail me out.
I got you. I got your back, police. But you know, like as you're talking about this, like Pollard's didn't need like a DEI initiative to tell them, like, this is how you create a more inclusive space and make money at the same time. And then I'm also thinking about holding that history. You know, I talked about the strikes, and all I can picture is Bridge Street packed, you know, in a battle zone, right? But all of these people singing songs from different languages that they may not understand, but they're learning them in solidarity with each other. And that history is here. That's Lowell's history. And then fast forward after the 70s, and we're bringing in more people from all different places. Now we have not just the folk festival, we have the African festival, we have the Puerto Rican festival. I think we have like a Colombian festival too.
Southeast Asian Water Festival.
Southeast Asian Water Festival. Just come on. Look at what we're doing here.
We just had the Greek Festival.
The Greek Festival,
weekends
yes.
ago.
Oh, and I should have said that because I know my neighbors were involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, so again, those roots are there, and those traditions are there, and people have maintained them. I just ran across a Library of Congress website the other day in doing this work that documented the Puerto Rican festivals that were held in Lowell for years and years in the 80s, with great photographs, but they were the same: food, music, dance, cultural representations, a weekend in the park, basically. And again, all of these things are the roots of and the legacies that the National Folk Festival that's here now in a couple of weeks that builds on. That connection really needs to be stressed, I think, as we approach the folk festival.
So somebody out there needs to be doing this work, and I'm glad that it's us.
The pressure's on each time we do a show to find something out, right? So this was an interesting one to do, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, and just in time for the second in-person folk festival right here in Lowell, the last weekend of July. Has it always been the last weekend of July?
Yes, from inception, it was the last weekend in July.
Hey, that actually, I don't know why that also just
In
touches me really deeply.
The 50th, I went back and looked at the dates for the 50th, and they're exact same dates as the dates for the one coming up.
Wow.
The exact same last 3 days. I can
yes.
hear the boarding house park stage from my house. So
that's one of my favorite things. Like as you get closer to, you just everything gets louder and louder, and you see people that you know.
Food smells mingling. Yeah. I'm excited.
One last thing. What's your favorite food booth that you go to, that you have to go?
I like all the Southeast Asian food booths. I really like the Burmese food booth.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
That's usually right across from Boarding House Park.
Yep.
Those are probably my favorites. I like getting fresh done lemonade.
Yes.
There's like a wagon that they'll like do the lemons right there and put like a ton of ice in. And I just can hold it on my forehead and cool off. I like that one. I actually like going through the spray things too. They have those spray things for kids, and of course I have to go through it.
I have a picture somewhere of me going through
Yeah.
just a couple of years back. Yeah, I love the Folk Fest. I love everything about it. Probably the Greek food. I usually make a stop at first, and then we go over to the Puerto Rican table, probably to the Vietnamese table, and then I think Cameroonians last year we went, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I need to go back, and I did.
Yep.
Yeah. My gosh.
You can eat your way around the world at the Folk Festival in Lowell.
Oh, and I intend to. And I guess they were years ago, and here we are.
They were doing it in Lowell in the 1930s, and we're doing it now in the 2020s.
We deserve it. Go Lowell, I'll give you that. Thanks, Bob, for all of this awesome history, and thank you all for tuning in. This has been History in Lowell.